Why stamp duty is ruining the housing market. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful David Powell, who is the CEO of the 40 branch estate and letting agency network in the south of England. Thanks for joining me today, David. Now, in 2025, you were quite vocal in the summer talking about stamp duty uh, and the fact that you believe it ruins the property market. It raises 12, 15 billion pounds a year, which is not a small amount of money. Tell me, why do you think it ruins the housing market and what would you replace it with? Talk to me.
Yeah, as you say, Chris, we spent a bit of effort last year in trying to drive some form of change, and we got some great support. Um, Several things to tackle here. Firstly, what we got to come away from is short-term fixes. Um, Multiple governments have played with stamp duty, and every time they play with it, they take it away, they reduce it, they give an incentive, you get an uplift, and that's great. But you then have to deal with the cliff edge at the end of it. And when you weigh that all up, quite frankly, not worth the effort. So we need a long-term solution, not a short-term solution. Um, it's becoming a significant cost. It's a barrier to entry to the market, particularly for first-time buyers, but even first-time movers probably, I would argue, are more effective. So when you look at the cost of stamp duty, £15,000, £500,000 house, fine, but it's more than that, Chris, because people often use the money from the sale of their property to pay for their moving costs for the next one. Therefore, they're actually adding that to their loan or their mortgage, not just paying the 15,000. So then it becomes a £25,000 bill over a 25-year term. So it's a significant cost, and I think that's something that we need to look for a way to eradicate. I don't think it's an annual property tax. I don't think it. I don't think it's a new tax that comes in per se. It might be a discounted version, but we've got to find a way where we can eradicate that or a large part of it to allow people to be able to move and to make it more affordable.
All sounds wonderful, but you haven't really answered the question. Okay, the question of what you're going to replace it with. I don't disagree with you that it's a tax on moving, and I'm surprised you haven't brought up the fact that what the newspapers say is that the old people won't move because of stamp duty, which again is a crock of rubbish. That's nothing to do with the reason they're not moving. Is what are you going to do to replace 12, 15 billion pound a year, which is a lot of cash?
Yeah, yeah. I
Would you
think
upload it? Would you put it on the sale at the end?
Um, no, I wouldn't, because that will deter people from moving if they're going to be lumped
Okay.
at the end. But I don't think the government necessarily have to have a look at the housing market to replace that tax with. So that tax can go into other areas. So if we one example, Chris, is if we took away that £12 billion that is in stamp duty now, and you put a road tax on any foreign vehicle that comes into the UK and drives on our motorways, that would replace the £12 billion. Now, you drive to France, Switzerland, and a lot of European countries, you have to pay to drive on their motorways. Okay. Now, I'm not
Come on,
suggesting.
that's not going to raise 12 billion quid a year.
Well, if you look at the number of lorries that come into this country from France in isolation, then it'll be a small amount of money per visit that will actually cover it. But whether or not that's the right solution, but I don't think we have to just look at stamp duty and think, right, okay, there's got to be a different property tax. I think it's a bigger picture to that, because if the property market moves, Chris, as we all know, in a buoyant property market, a lot of other industries benefit from it. So I don't think it has to be as insular as it's a property tax, therefore we got to create another one. I don't think it's that direct.
Ultimately, people are going to pay. I mean, you said you didn't want like a property annual property tax. Why not?
I, because for me, look, at the moment, stamp duty is a choice. Okay, it's a choice in the sense of, well, you pay it if you buy a property. That's a choice. If it's an annual tax, well, okay, you've all got a property, you've all got to pay it. So that seems to be slightly unfair. If you're going to just tax people an annual tax from the point they've moved, then that's going to stifle the market. So you wouldn't want to do that.
This is really just an issue for London and the posh southeast where you're based, isn't it?
Well, some of our offices are based in the
Come
southeast.
on, most of them are based in the south. Okay, you've got Bristol and around there. I'll give you
Yeah.
that. But come on, this is a London problem.
I think a large part of the revenue is generated from inside the M25. So yeah,
And isn't it interesting that that's the market that's been on its arse? That's the technical term
yeah,
for the last few years.
absolutely. And I guess if you look at the way the government handled the stamp duty, potential changes, not changes, yeah, that stifled that market even further.
Yes, it did, but more in the million or 2 million market, not the sub one. That everything was hunky dory. Again, it's newspapers are very good at looking at the headlines. We're all looking, but when you actually dive down up to about 700 grand, it was hunky dory as hell.
Uh, Um, yeah, I think there's a challenge, I Chris, over the £500,000 market because of the way they were discussing the tax at £500,000,
Okay.
although short-lived.
Okay, well, we'll just have to agree, disagree. I'll show you my stats after we switch the cameras off. When I say I'm joshing, I am joshing, but the stats do back that up. Um, can we agree that the stamp duty is a tax on moving, and we can also agree that by releasing it, there would be more fluidity in the market, and we can both agree that when there's more fluidity in the market, a lot more industries benefit from it. What we don't agree on is how we're going to replace £12 billion a year.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think the one challenge you've got with removing stamp duty, Chris, is that's great in a buoyant market because the government will get their money from the process of all the other things that come off the back of a buoyant market. But in a market that may decline, um, not suggesting the market we got now is going to decline, but if you had a declining market, then you're not going to have that revenue boosting up, and that's the challenge the government will have with just removing it.
Put your thoughts in the comments. Am I talking rubbish? Is David talking rubbish? Are we all talking rubbish? Are we making sense? Love to know your thoughts. Thank you for your time today, David.